Welcome to A&N In Depth. Today we'll be talking with Joe Reeves, who writes Bible guides for a living now, and we'll discover his story and why the Bible matters to him, and it should matter to you. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. There's a little button underneath. You might have picked it up for now, or if you're watching this on Spotify or iTunes podcasts, in that case, you'll be listening, wouldn't you? That's great. Thank you for every minute that you spend with us. It's very meaningful to us, and hopefully it will be meaningful to you. Joe, welcome to A&N In Depth. How are you?
Thanks. Doing great. Thanks for including me. Glad to be here.
Good. Joe, you've recently taken on the In-Verse Bible Guides. What exactly is that?
In-Verse is the young adult quarterly that the church publishes, and it's translated in different languages and used around the world. It's a little bit of a newer format that the church has been using since the fall of 2019, and so our subscriptions are increasing. And I'm excited to be here and to see how it goes. Careful what questions you ask me. I'm a little bit new. You said, did you say recent? I'm still living in a hotel and hopefully closing on a house soon.
All right, good. By the time people listen, I think you will be well settled. When you say young adults, what exactly does that mean? What age group are we describing here?
I think probably 18 to, a lot of our young adult Sabbath school classes will have ages 18, collegiate to sometimes young professional, maybe 35. It's a little bit of a wider age range than some of the previous Sabbath schools, but it varies a lot from church to church.
So about 150 years ago when the church started, they would just be considered adults.
Yeah.
But now that we have delayed adolescence for 10 years, they are young adults.
We still consider them adults, and our quarterlies are written on an adult level. And one of our things that we do as well is 2 quarters of the year corresponds with the topic of the adult quarterly, and then 2 topics a year, 2 quarters a year, our own topic that may be of more interest to the young adult category.
That's a very difficult age in terms of religion, because usually that's when people leave. That's when look, I've done the church thing that my parents wanted me to do, and now I'm out. Usually they go to university, they start looking at the world, and they start exploring other, let's call it philosophical frameworks, other beliefs, So does that burden weigh heavily on you? Or how are you feeling now that you're starting to do this for perhaps the most difficult group that we have to engage with?
Yeah, the burden weighs heavily on me, and it excites me as well. So in the teen years, a child is transitioning from childhood to adulthood, from identity with parents, which is what they have their identity in as a child, to an adult, to their own identity, and somewhere in between they pass through a phase where their identity is very closely connected to their peer group, and so they can be very self-conscious, not having their own identity yet. But in those times, the question as it relates to faith and the faith community is, am I retaining and embracing the faith that I potentially received from my parents, my spiritual heritage, and making it my own as well? Or am I rebranding myself and going another direction?
So you're writing Bible guides. This is giving people a process, a guide to understanding Scripture. How do you do that?
Yeah, so, the Bible has the answers to the questions that press on every age and every culture. And as leaders and communicators, it's on us to bring the Scripture to the relevant concerns and the relevant questions. And so as for writing Bible guides, we're bringing forth the beautiful promises and the answers from Scripture that God has for His children and His people. And so it's the goal to make it relevant. It's the goal to remove barriers from faith, because we run into little rocks in our shoes or little roadblocks that may be a potential roadblock to our faith. Those should be identified. Those questions should be addressed. and explored and looked at, which could also be a challenge. We may be a little self-conscious sometimes, and leaders in the church are a little nervous about young people asking dangerous questions and being careful with those. But actually,
What's a dangerous question?
Yeah, I don't know, because I've kind of subscribed to the philosophy that questions as regards the foundations of our faith, does God exist? Can I trust him? Those are good questions because the Bible has good answers. And as we explore those things, it can strengthen your faith. By ignoring, say, that you have a doubt, creation, evolution, why suffering, whatever it be, that doubt, if you don't actually address the question, then you just leave it there and it can linger for a while and then it can take over. And so
Tell me about the process you have, if any, of discovering what questions young adults are asking.
Well, I don't know in my department, and being new, what systematic approaches we'll have, but personally, it's been being a pastor. It's been a youth pastor. I was a youth pastor for 5 years in Berrien Springs, Michigan at the Village Church. It's working with young adults. I started a young adult program when I was a pastor in Detroit some years ago. It was a Bridge Vespers. It grew to 120 young adults rather quickly. And so sometimes some of these things I've done as a pastor, I've realized some of the vacancies that have been in the hearts of young adults, wanting community, wanting connection. But as a pastor, when I was in Berrien Springs, we did every summer I took youth out on a trip, those that signed up. We called it Extreme Bible Workout, and I took them for 2 or 3 weeks. And the trip was a combination of missions and backpacking. We would take them out to a reservation in Montana, and then we would go to Yellowstone or Glacier. And we would pick one book of the Bible during that trip and give them their own time alone with God in the morning to spend in a chapter of the Bible. We did a Gospel of Mark, Gospel of Luke. We did Proverbs one year. We come back after time alone with God, and these teenagers would share what they had learned themselves from the Word. And some mornings I would give them postcards, and I would ask them the question, why do you or why do you not trust God? And so they would write down their answers, and they would give them to me. So me personally, that's how I've learned some of these things, because I asked the questions. And that second part of the question, actually, I guess we could say is a dangerous question. It's a dangerous question to ask, why do you not trust God? But if I'm on a trip and I'm spending time and I have a relationship with this young person, I'm willing to ask the dangerous question and hear why they don't trust God, so that I can identify that thing and engage with them on it.
Okay. You are tackling a very serious it's not so much of a problem as it is an eternal task, which is to inspire a new generation that it's worth dedicating their lives to fulfilling the mission God gave us. And all the data seems to suggest that young people are less and less interested in religion, the superficial data. But the deeper data points in a different direction. You have some questions are different that this generation is asking, but most of them are pretty much the same questions that people have asked in the history of humanity. For the last few generations, purpose and meaning has taken on a great deal of the conversation. Mainly because we have, as a society, decided to play an experiment, which is, what if things don't have intrinsic value in and of themselves, and every value we attach to those things is something that we are feeling as humans. It's our perception of it, not the thing itself. So this is C.S. Lewis, as far as I know, was the first one who tackled this head on in the 1920s, mainly, I think, because of the First World War. We decided that propaganda was a real thing and it was dangerous. This would come to materialize in the Second World War, when the Nazi propaganda machine showed the world what branding looks like. Some people position the birth of modern branding squarely in Joseph Goebbels' camp. Joseph Goebbels was Hitler's communication guy. And they used all communication methods to lead Germany, and we know what happened. But between the world wars, you had a lot of English text, English grammar, textbook writers, so experts in English grammar, that started to deviate the English language into an analysis of internal reaction to something rather than the thing itself being true. So if you take this mug, it's got my initial on it. This mug is beautiful. Or this mug is, in the example of C.S. Lewis's book, which is a phenomenal three chapters. It's one of the best books ever written, in my opinion. So in that book, he talks about the fountain. The fountain is sublime. And the new English grammar that they were trying to push was, okay, the mountain is incapable of being anything. You are associating feelings of sublimity. You are associating feelings of beauty with this that you've just seen. Therefore, you believe that it is like this. But I may believe differently. So the object no longer has intrinsic value in and of itself. You see, in the history of humanity before then, with very few philosophical exceptions, the object deserved the word sublime or not. The point is that the object contained its own truth. Well, but now our language began to change. Now we began to see, we started to interpret that this doesn't have anything in it of itself. It's my interpretation that really matters. So the self-centeredness, C.S. Lewis said, would bring the destruction of humanity, of civilization as we knew it. I don't know how he had this insight, because I think postmodernism is rooted on this. There is no literature on this. I am making those connections, in my own reading. But postmodernism is rooted in textual critique. And it became everything. It became a power game, because the thing itself no longer has intrinsic values. We've removed truth from our conversation. Okay, so you want to be loving. Okay. What does that mean to you? Right? All of a sudden, we are the center of the universe, each one of us. And truth itself is relative to your vantage point, your viewpoint, your experience, really. So experience became king in all elements of life. Now, I'm giving you that whole context to say that we've had multiple generations being taught that there are no intrinsic values in this mug, and that it's all relative. Your mission is to communicate that this is not how the universe works. That when I watched a video recently of a mother freeing her daughter from a raccoon, right? She gets out of the house. The raccoon is biting the foot of the daughter, 6-year-old or 5. And the mom doesn't even flinch. She just goes for the raccoon, picks the raccoon up, frees the daughter. She gets in, and then she shoves the raccoon. That is courageous. She didn't even think of herself. She thought of her daughter. The act itself has intrinsic value. And I can use good words to describe it or bad words to describe it, but the value isn't somewhere in my head or yours. It is in the act itself. So there are no power dynamics between that mom and that daughter. How do you communicate that to a generation that is wearing the wrong set of eyeglasses? So you see what I'm getting at, right? They don't see that that's what is stopping them from finding the truth about the universe. But that's how they see the world. Mm-hmm. Well, that's your truth. That's your reality, not mine, and so on. So tell me more about that tension.
Well, every generation has some critique on the previous generation, their ideas and identifying the shortcomings or the weaknesses thereof. So in the generation of modernity, there was a stronger foundation for truth. The postmodern generation comes along, and they see the abuses of the previous century and the fakeness and the hypocrisy of Christianity that was also wrapped up in colonialism and also slavery and other contradictions. And so we've developed a postmodern outlook that threatens the very sense of reality, as you have well described. But that's not going to hold up forever either. And so to a postmodern mindset, I'm hopeful that the strong foundations of the Bible are going to be more appealing than ever.
Well, that's the good news.
The good part is that we have to speak truth to reality, and that there is a real truth, and that there is real reality, and not everything in life is based off of feelings, as you just described. But the good part about the generation of postmodernism is that they also want something that is genuine and that is real. And so some of the packaging and communication of propaganda of the previous time period, they see through it. They see the fakeness of everything, and they want something that's real, and they want something that's genuine. And the Bible and the God of the Bible has something to offer there. But as leaders in the Adventist Church, it's our challenge to communicate something in life that is real and that is true and that is worth living for and that is worth dying for. So this is why you've got young people signing up for military, signing up to do the Marines, going into business and meeting great challenges in life. They're living for something real. But the message of the cross has something to more challenging, more real, more risk than any of those other things you could take on in life. So my concern is that today in the church, we have a generation that might be slipping a little bit in literacy of the Bible, literacy of missions, and literacy of history. And so it used to be that young people and everybody going to camp meetings, Adventist camp meetings, they're hearing from the missionaries that are on furlough in different parts of the world and the exciting stories. And it could be slightly ironic that in the age of social media and hyper communication, we may be less in touch with what we're doing around the world than before, at least with some of us. And so to make those things relevant, what our church is doing with other cultures in different places, to make our history relevant and where we've come from and our spiritual lineage and journey, and then maybe most importantly, the biblical message. And so as I'm editing quarterlies, our focus is Bible study and the biblical message. But I have goals of intertwining that with our spiritual identity through knowing our history and through being literate in missions and what we're doing around the world and what our church is doing as well.
Excellent. Well, I have observed that our young people are desperately looking for reasons to stay in the church, not to leave.
I would affirm. Yep.
We think that they're just waiting to leave and they want to leave. They don't. Mm-mm. Very few of them want to leave, but they need good reasons to stay, and they're looking for those reasons.
I agree.
I have observed also that they're looking for genuine faith.
Mm-hmm.
But
Absolutely.
There are many of our local church leaders, and perhaps our pastors are also also demonstrating this behavior, which is to play religion, but cool. Let's play cool. Mm-hmm. Let's not show that we are fully engaged in this. Let's also see it. They search for, how can I put this in a concise way? They seem to overvalue questions and undervalue the answers that come from those questions.
Yeah.
So it's cool and trendy to ask difficult questions, even as you forget to pursue the actual answers that the Bible gives to those questions.
For sure.
And when you are the pastor and you seem to be swimming in more questions and doubts than you have answers that solidly ground your life, that produces no end of spiritual anxiety.
True.
In everyone around you, because you're the guy that is meant to believe this thing and dedicate your life to this thing. But every time that we meet, you seem to be more interested in questions than you are in answering those questions. Now, this is not unique to Adventism. Contemporary Christianity has become obsessed with more questions than answers. We're just reflecting the culture of our day. How dangerous do you think that is to new generations?
Oh, I think that's a real danger. And that's why it is dangerous to ask questions unless there's the forum and the people to actually engage and provide answers. Because it does us no good to latch on to those vacancies that we have or those missing pieces that we feel like we have and make those the mountain that we stumble on and lose our faith. God is real. Jesus came the first time. He's going to come back the second time. It's all reality. Any one of us can be, the Bible promises there will be a people in the last days who keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. Any young person, any person that chooses can be a part of that. They can follow Jesus. There's answers, and when there's doubts, it's not that every question will be answered to the nth degree, but enough can be provided that you choose to trust God for whatever is missing and to gain some further knowledge later. I mean, if I understood everything, if I had every answer, I would be God. It's a proof of his divinity and of the divinity of Scripture that there are things that no pastor or professor could explain. But we can give solid answers on enough to trust God with the rest. And so we have to be at the forefront of providing that and communicating that and doing it in relationship, which is tough in my position because in my position, the church is providing resources, but we hope that those resources are used on a local church level in relationship. It's as the relationship with teachers, or pastors, pathfinder leaders, professors, whatever they be. You said a minute ago that you believe that young people are looking for a reason to stay. I believe that. And the way we provide that is by providing the answers, is by providing the relationships and engaging them, which is a topic we haven't talked much about yet, but that they have a job in church, that they are engaged in activity, that we give them responsibility, we give them space to make mistakes. As we provide those things, then church feels like home. They already maybe know intellectually that church is home, but they also need to feel it. And so it's all of those things together.
Let me go back to before we dive deeper into this topic. The opposite of being obsessed with questions and not with answers, or worshiping doubt is another way to put it. There is another extreme, of, as you alluded to, not allowing questions and doubts to be expressed, or worse, allowing them to be expressed and providing a cookie-cutter response from 40 years ago.
Sure.
So, in other words, answering someone else's questions, not the person who is asking that question or that has indeed that doubt. So those are two extremes that I believe we should definitely avoid.
Yeah. Well, and before we leave this, just to highlight that the Adventist message has the very best biblical answers on the toughest questions of any church in Christianity.
Consistently, every religion has the answer to those questions, but we have we obsess over the relationship of those answers to each other. So how does this relate to that, which relates to that, which relates to this?
Yeah. A couple examples. Big question: how do you know that God exists? And the Adventist message has a stronger answer to that basic question. When we come forward with closely connected with that, the authenticity or the authority, the inspiration of Scripture, and our understanding of prophecies. Who else is teaching the message of the 70 weeks and the time prophecy of the Messiah and the foreknowledge of God 5 centuries in advance with prophet Daniel to know when the Messiah would be cut off or to know when the date the Messiah would be anointed? Who else is teaching? Who else is showing the succession of the 4 kingdoms in Daniel 2 and 7? Some of them are on that one. And to show the division of the 4th kingdom and to see that if God is right and verifiably true in the predictions and the descriptions of earthly kingdoms, and that can be tested, what he said would happen millennia in advance, then can I trust him what he said about a kingdom in heaven, which I cannot see with my eyes? Yes, when you believe in a heaven and in a destination that God has prepared for us, you're believing in something you can't see. But God has made claims on things that you can see and test with your eyes. And Adventist has an understanding and a teaching and explanation better than really anybody else on those things so that a young person can see, yes, what the Bible has said concerning things that I can see with my eyes is true. I can test it like a laboratory through history. It's verifiable. Therefore, I trust him with the things I can't see. That's one question. The other big question out there is why suffering? Everybody asks it. And that was the most common question when I was doing youth ministry. When I first started youth ministry, I thought maybe the big question would be, why does God exist? Or how do I know that God exists? After being a pastor for a few years, I realized that is a substantial question that maybe, this isn't a scientific number, this is just personal experience, maybe 20% of the youth have. But I realized that there could be 80. There could be a large majority. They know God exists. They know he's there, but they're not sure they can trust him. And they're not sure they want to go that.
That's
that
great
way.
insight. Only 6% of the U.S. is atheist.
Yeah.
So it's a tiny minority that are atheists.
Yeah.
Most people believe that God does exist, but what is he like becomes the
So this is just a human question.
issue.
And the Adventist message excites me so much because it has the best answer on that question that anybody can provide and that you're hearing in messaging. We believe that hell is not for eternal, that those that are destroyed are turned to ashes. That's a huge obstacle in the character of God. And why does he allow this if God is burning sinners forever and ever and for eternity? Our picture of the great controversy between Christ and Satan and why, as communicated through the parable of the wheat and the tares, the master of the vineyard waits until separating the wheat and the tares. There has to be a certain maturity of evil, a certain maturity of also of righteousness until the harvest, and he can't get in and interfere every time right now. And so we will experience pain in this world. There's a reason for it. There's much more that could be said just to say that our message has the best, the good answers for these human questions. So
Yes, it
I
does.
honestly wish that we were diving in more and providing these answers, because I think some of our young people don't realize what we actually have.
Over the last 40 years, there has been a dialogue to minimize the importance of doctrine.
Sure.
To say, well, young people are not interested in doctrine. We know the doctrine, but what really matters is this other thing over here.
Yeah.
What you're describing is a return to doctrine. You're describing a process of understanding the Bible systematically, which is the only way to build a proper foundation for your life, is to understand the Bible systematically, not just haphazardly. Now, this means that doctrine is no longer something for pastors who decide to give their lives to this. It's for everyone.
Oh, it's absolutely essential. Doctrine enables you. A doctrine is an understanding of God. It enables you to go through the situations, the tough things that you go through in life. And I'll take it. What I'm describing is systematic doctrine. What I'm describing is Jesus. What was Jesus? He was a teacher. And so as we know Jesus, we know what he stood for, what he communicated. There's been a kind of a strange effort that maybe in broader Christianity, and seeped into Adventism a little bit, to kind of separate Jesus from doctrine. It's really a futile attempt, because Jesus came into this world with a message. He was a person, and he had a message. He gave a promise that he was returning. We believe that promise. And then the last book of the Bible is the revelation of Jesus Christ. And so kind of what I feel is an attempt at times to put off in a corner the Jesus of the four Gospels, when the Jesus of the four Gospels is the same Jesus of the whole canon and of this final message, which is called the revelation of Jesus Christ. So when Seventh-day Adventists have a little particular focus on prophecy, it's well justified, and that the message of Scripture ends with this clarion call from Jesus. These are the challenges that are going to happen before I come back in this world. He gives these visions that are through symbols of beasts and such. These are the challenges that you'll face, and it's to let us know that he knew that all along. It's not a surprise. We can go through the 1,260 years of tribulation. We can go through the final showdown between good and evil. And Jesus is going to have the last word. And in Revelation 17, the promise is that the Lamb is going to win, but not only the Lamb, those who stand with him, those that are faithful and true. And so if I stand with Jesus, I don't have to worry. He'll carry me through. And so I think the attempt to separate Jesus from doctrine, or put the Jesus of four Gospels, separate that from the Jesus of Revelation, I think that's a futile attempt.
Much of it comes from our inability to communicate with new generations.
Could be.
When 40% of the words you use are not intelligible to a new generation, or don't communicate what you think it does, then the natural response is, well, we don't need that. What we need is Jesus. And then they proceed to create another doctrine or re-articulate the same doctrine, because you cannot articulate anything about Christ or God without doing systematic theology. That's the very point of trying to describe reality from God's perspective, is a process of creating doctrine or articulating doctrine. So we can't avoid it. We have to get into it. But this idea that at the same time, this idea of when I meet a difficult word, it's not for me, well, that's not a good way to live your life. If 2 + 2 was enough when you were 6 years old, it should not be enough when you're 16. It will still be true, but you should have a deeper understanding of math to be able to handle more complex equations. That's part of growth. The Apostle Paul says, when I was a child, I spoke like a child. And he describes this process of maturity and of growth theologically and otherwise. And in this context, also love. That his ability to love increases even as he understands more and more doctrine, even as he understands more and more who God is and who the Jesus who appeared to him on the road to Damascus is. Mm-hmm. But all doctrine needs to lead to love. If love isn't a reality, you can know everything, as he put it himself. Mm-hmm. Paul put it himself. And if you have not love, it's worthless.
Yeah. So that would be one of the goals of the things that we're writing in the quarterlies. And right now when I arrived, we're editing on a quarterly coming out in a little while on the book of Leviticus. Many consider that to be a more challenging book. And so it does have big concepts. It's the concept, it has words like atonement. Mm-hmm. And but it's I love how the author of that quarterly has shown that it's Jesus is every sacrifice. The book is to reveal Jesus. And our Adventist understanding of the atonement, Day of Atonement in Leviticus 16, and finally the antitypical day is revealed in the 2300 days. That's one of our kind of more unique doctrines and sometimes more attacked doctrines. It's Christ-centered. It's about what is Jesus' ministry looking like now? What is he doing right before he comes back? It's all about that. It's the length that he's going to save people like me. And so there's such beauty, there's such depth, there's such richness to Scripture. It's just my desire, if any way possible, that more people would experience that. And there shouldn't be an excuse. We can take baby steps. There's no problem with that. But there shouldn't be an excuse for biblical illiteracy. We do need to understand the terms of Scripture and bridge the gap and describe them in today's terms.
How can people read Inverse?
So it's online. A lot of people engage at inversebible.org. All of our lessons are there. Churches can subscribe to receiving the quarterly just like they do an adult quarterly or children's Sabbath school. The churches where I just recently pastored, they receive it every quarter, and the young adults, the collegiates are studying. It's on the app. You can find it on there through our website and read it there. And it's printed in a couple different formats so that you can journal. It's very biblically based. So there's one passage for the week, and there's some attached verses to look at to explain the theme passage. But our journal version of the quarterly has a lot of blank pages so that you can study that passage, reflect on it, do some cross-referencing, and be writing out your own thoughts during the week. And so it's really an effort to engage directly with the text, because we realize that if our spiritual food is all through pastors, all through teachers, we're really kind of going to always be babies. But if we can engage directly, then we can really mature. And so that quarterly is designed for that, but it also has some of the trendy stuff. There's QR codes in there attached with some videos, and so we're engaging with media. We have a weekly panel discussion that's released that studies it, and I am hoping a lot of churches around the world do what my local church did where I pastored, where the young adults would teach themselves. And so the young people would teach each other. And so they would get on, some of them told me they would get on and look at the video that was released on Hope Channel, the half-hour study of the quarter's lessons, and they would look through that, and then that would help prepare them to teach. Sure. And so we have 20-year-olds, whatever, plus or minus, teaching each other. And that the expression of faith is one of the very important ways to help deepen faith.
Our church started with 20-year-olds studying the Bible together, so for themselves.
I mean, it was cross-generational. You got, Joseph Bates and others, but the editor of the review.
Bates,
I'll grant you. And but you got the editors that are young. What was Loughborough 21 years old or something when he wrote the first article in 1851 on the second beast of Revelation 13. I was recently studying that and preaching on it, and the insight he had, and I think James White was even younger, the editor, and the things that they were writing and studies, it blows my mind, because what they were, the first publication that we have on Revelation 13, the second beast, and the explanation they give is pretty much still what we're saying.
But then, they didn't have adolescents. So when they came to 17, 18, they were adults, ready to take on the world.
At age 14, J. N. Andrews was getting up at 4 a.m. and studying his Bible for 3 hours before breakfast. And he was, before long, reading the Bible in 7 languages, including Greek and Hebrew. And he was doing these things as a teenager. And so, where are the 14-year-olds now doing that? And it may not look the same, but we need to challenge ourselves. We have big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
There's no wonder he became the first missionary to Europe and was translating our publications and writing them in other languages over there. But
Joe, we talked about church history. Let's talk about your history. Were you born in America?
Yeah.
Whereabouts?
Washington State. Yeah.
Okay, on the other side of where we are.
Yeah, and that's just where I moved from, in Spokane, Washington.
Okay, it's very far from here. And were you an Adventist growing up, or did you discover it later?
I was extremely privileged to grow up in a home where I learned the Bible stories at a young age, and where they took me to prophecy seminars at a young age. When I was below 10, I'd go to the kids' meeting. I don't remember if it was age 11 or so. It was before 12. I said I was going to go upstairs to the adult meetings they do in a prophecy seminar. And I was amazed how much I could understand. And so the Sabbath was always there for me. So Adventism's been part of my spiritual heritage, which I feel very responsible for. As a teenager, I went through that time. Then I decided I don't want to be an Adventist just because it's my culture, or even a Christian just because it's what my family believes. I only want to be a Christian, and I only want to be an Adventist if I can defend it. And so that kind of led me into studying different topics. And the more I studied, the more excited and really proud I was to be where I was at.
Siblings?
Grew up in the middle of 5 kids. Older brother and sister, younger brother and sister. And so I always that's how I learned to relate to everybody. Older brother and sister, and younger brother and sister.
When did you feel called to ministry?
Interesting question. I had confusion when I was a teenager because I was interested in too many things. Went to community college my first year, and favorite class was chemistry. And I thought maybe I should go into medicine. I loved working with people. I was working in our family business doing graphics, and so thought maybe I should study business. So I made a decision, I guess age 18 probably. I was going to take some gap years and do full-time ministry. And so I went to Amazing Facts. I went into Bible work in the Wisconsin Conference and worked for some churches there. And because I decided if I was a businessman or a musician, that was another great interest of mine. I had a teacher wanting me to come study piano performance. And I thought, well, whatever I do, I want to be able to share my faith. And so I'll go get trained on how to share my faith and how to engage the world. But in that process, being a Bible worker and such, the church asked me. It wasn't the plans at first, but things changed. The speaker evangelist fell through, and they said, "Oh, Joe, why don't you preach the evangelistic meetings?"
Yes, Joe, you can do it.
So that was my first one, and I did it, and I saw people responding and God blessing the efforts in spite of my foibles and mistakes and every other thing, and seeing people being baptized. And I couldn't shake the conviction after that God wanted me in full-time ministry. And so I went to Southern Adventist University, studied theology, kind of with the plans to become an evangelist, because I thought being a pastor, to put it negatively, forgive me.
It's very boring.
I thought, who wants to babysit Adventists for a living? I want to be out there. I want to be winning souls. And but eventually God worked on my heart. I did do a good bit of evangelism, but the more I did it, the more I realized that, more than needing hero evangelists, actually every local church is supposed to be a training center. And it's really every member of the church that God wants to share the blessing of winning souls with. And so he needs patient shepherds and pastors who will train and equip. And so that kind of moved me into pastoring.
Married?
Yeah, married to a beautiful wife with 2 kids, ages 2 and 4.
Fun.
So we are at the exciting time of life right now.
Actually, the excitement never ends. I mean, I'm hoping it ends one day when they leave, but I have 3 boys.
We are very blessed.
Very good. Okay. And now you've moved to Maryland.
Yeah.
And you are focusing on this crucial mission. What are your expectations for the next few years in terms of your life itself? How do you expect things will change from what you had before to now? And how do you feel, walking around our world headquarters, writing curriculum for millions of young people?
Yeah, well, I don't want to, I'm done guessing at my future. Being here was a big surprise. I was fully expecting to be in Spokane longer, with my most recent district, but life has its turns and its corners, and boy, we've put a lot of prayer into different decisions we made, including coming here. It was definitely not an automatic yes just because I got a call from the World Church to do something. I knew that not every call from the General Conference is a call from God, and my family did a lot of praying and really knowing where God wanted me to be at this time.
And you were in Spokane before coming
Yeah,
here?
we were in Spokane. I had 2 church districts, Spokane Northview Church and also Spirit Lake, Idaho. Loved working with those churches, great people, and we were having a great time there. And so your guess is as good as mine, my long-term future, but I want to just embrace the responsibility I've been given right now. And so we want to produce the very best quarterlies that are really engaging the text and making it relevant and clear explanations. I want to enter more into the space of media and video in different ways, and some topics that I'm just lining up right now. I'm already talking to some different experts in the field at making short videos that could be shown at the beginning that give more background and literacy to our history, our missions. There's a little bit of a travel budget with the position I accepted here, so it will include traveling to different divisions in the world where we can increase different languages that it's translated into and see how the work with young adults is going in different places of the world.
Are you excited about that?
I am, yeah. I like travel. I don't want to fill up my schedule with travel. I got young kids, and so it's not going to be my main thing, but I'm excited. I love engaging other cultures and backgrounds, and our church is an exciting church in all kinds of different places. So
I'm looking forward to seeing what will materialize out of this. I think you should have an Inverse podcast.
Yeah, and I also have to add that what I've received from the previous editor with Justin Kim, they've produced a great product. So there's a lot of things I don't have a burden to change as taking a new position here, but I can take the great things that have been done already and add pieces to it. Mm-hmm. And you can give me some tips. We can work with some of your communications people, and whether it's podcast or some other variety of formats, we're ready to do it.
We'll be glad to help. Most of our efforts are in a similar direction to what you have, and you have content that we need.
Yeah.
So I think that collaboration will be vital. Okay. How do you engage? Let's go back to that question that we had before. How do you engage with young adults that are either busy studying or working in a way that they will dedicate time, money, effort to mission, locally and globally? Mm-hmm. Give me some thoughts about that.
First of all, we understand the real life. You and I live busy lives too, and we realize that a lot of our people in our Sabbath school, same thing. In our quarterly, we have, a main passage to read. And if you're journaling, we suggest writing that passage out in a translation of your choice and circling words that stand out for you. This is one of the ways we're getting people to engage. But we have, if you don't have time to do a whole chapter, we say if you're pressed for time or whatever, you can just choose these 3 to 5 verses. And so we are constantly thinking from our very writing on up of engaging busy people, so that they're still engaged with whatever they're able to give or do that with. So on the local church level, I think that when I'll just say, for example, I've done many evangelistic meetings as a pastor, and it's tough to come out to evangelistic meetings. It's every night, or 4 nights a week, whatever it be. And young adults are in college or they're young professionals. And so, but when you ask them to do something, they love it and they really stand up. And it's the most important things, like running AV, which isn't necessarily being up front, but that's one of the most important jobs. It's the greeters, it's the registration, it's the kids, it's the music, visitation. And sometimes you ask them to do something, they think, oh, can I do that? But they're honored that you ask them. And you will be surprised. You will be surprised. Don't not ask them because you think they're busy. Don't say, I can't ask them to do this because they're too busy. Ask them to do something small. You'll be surprised sometimes. Say, yeah, I'll do that. And they will cancel a sport event or some other event. They'll sacrifice it because you asked them to do something at church. And go for it. Engage them. Give them responsibility. And, I don't disagree with the emphasis that I've heard lately of having young adults in leadership. Both my churches, I had some young adults on church board. And I'm not saying that the whole, you fire all the old people, because I value the seniors in my local church. They have incredible insights. I'm about cross-generational. And so that young person will come to the board, and they're forming, my church boards are usually very positive meetings, and they're forming good relationships with these other people. They're leaders in the church. And you thought that they were too busy, maybe too immature, and maturity is a thing. You don't want to put somebody into something that isn't ready for it, so that has to be evaluated. But ask, engage, and even the busy ones will say yes.
I was a local church pastor for 11 years in London, England.
Awesome.
And I've discovered a few things exactly as you're describing. But when you ask someone, first, if you need something done, you need to ask a busy person.
Exactly.
People that have plenty of time are not going to deliver for you.
You're right.
So, but when you do ask them, I had this technique which worked really well for me. Number one, give a limited time span for the commitment.
Yeah.
I need you for 7 weeks. I need you for 5 weeks. I need you for 1 weekend. Mm-hmm. So that's the first. It's a limited thing. And I need you for 2 years. No. I mean, some people will take that responsibility and the board and all of that, but usually the very busy people, it takes many small commitments before they give you their full 2-year commitment. Mm-hmm. Next, don't invite them to meetings. People hate useless meetings. Mm-hmm. Most of them even hate planning meetings.
Sure.
Because it's eight meetings for 2 hours of ministry. It's not what they want. Mm-hmm. You do need to have meetings to plan and do it properly, but don't involve the busy young people in that process unless it is essential for them to be there. And if it is essential, then don't invite them to serve elsewhere. Just invite them to come to those planning meetings. Sometimes you have some great strategists. It's like, I need you for 4 weeks, Tuesday night, 2 hours each time, to plan for that. And what we're going to do is plan. You're not going to execute. You're just going to help me strategize. And they will give you that time. The last one is, whatever training is needed, do it within minutes, not hours. Because most things in church, the training is very quick. Complex things like AV, you need 3 years. So you're not going to call somebody to help you with that, immediately. But someone can set up the mics. Their job is setting up the mics. Okay, I can train someone to set up the mics in less than 15 minutes. These are where the mics are at. You take them, you put this is the connection, and then you test it, and you're done. I need you to do that for me for 3 months, just 1/4 of the year. Can you do that? So, limited time, no meetings, and very short training, minutes, not hours. With this, you can involve everybody. And if it's the pastor or an elder asking, people will say yes. It's unbelievable to me, as you said, the kind of people that would say yes. I had some members, and not just young either, but I had some members who were high executives for some pretty large corporations. They were hardly ever there, and they said yes. And 2 hours of their time can be so incredibly valuable. They can achieve a lot in 2 hours. They've been honing their craft for decades, and suddenly they can give you that. The other thing that I found that is very helpful is the matching needs with those that can help with those needs. So people generally trust pastors, thankfully, with what's going on in their lives. They disclose to the pastor things that they wouldn't other people. And I found it to be incredibly helpful to go to some families or some people that can help them in that situation, describe that there is a family with this problem. Would you be interested in helping? If they say, absolutely, I'm willing to help, then you tell them who it is, and they are the ones. It's not just the church is bringing the food. No, it's another family who is connecting and helping.
Oh,
so that's
essential.
Those are some things that I found very helpful.
Those are excellent tips. I mean, what you're describing is community. And there are several different tiers, and that's a very essential tier because that kind of reach, like you said, everybody. The other thing I add is that both my churches I just came from, we have a young adult or two that's on the elder team. And so there are some that are spiritual, that are leaders, that are articulate, and they're strong with the Lord. They have great insight. And it's important to pull them in so that they're also getting mentored in church leadership. And, man, I just wish our churches were turned loose.
One of my burdens was when I was a youth pastor or associate pastor of a church, and the youth were my main responsibility, is that some of my 20-somethings, they had at work, they were given 2-3 million pounds budget to handle in their department.
At work?
At work.
Yeah.
And then they would turn up at church, and we wouldn't trust them with the key to the back rooms.
Yeah.
And that to them did not, they tried, they were very, gracious and peaceful and calm, but it was a shock to them.
Yeah.
And it was a shock to me. I didn't know how else to handle it. And I brought it to the church, in a church board. I said, guys, we need to think of this. And then I delivered my whole speech. And yeah, there was some changes after that. This was a large church in North London, and many young people joined the board and joined the elder teams and so on based on that. Okay, Joe, let's wrap this up. Bible, history, and mission. Those are the top words that I've heard from you today. Mm-hmm. If you're talking to 20-year-olds that are listening to this.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you share a few words with them? You can look to this camera over here.
Hi.
And then perhaps you could pray for them.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. No, we have been given we live in an extraordinary time. We have extraordinary opportunities. There's no time like living like we do now. We have more reasons to believe in God than we've ever had before. There's more prophecies that are past than ever before. Our as far as travel and communications, we have more opportunities to travel and to communicate, set aside COVID, than ever before. We are to be engaging our cultures in the mission and the message of this church all around. So there's no time like now when it's time to be alive, when it's time to know God, when it's time to give Him our whole hearts, completely consecrated to Him, and to serve Him, and to study the Bible, like you said, like never before. Because while previous generations studied it and knew it and were expecting certain things to happen, there's been a delay, and those things didn't happen. Well, what if we're the ones upon whom the end of all things is come? We better know our topics. We better know our studies. And Jesus will bless us like we cannot imagine. For as I said earlier, the promise, the book of Revelation, more than a book of prophecies, is a book of promises. And the promise is for us. God will have a group of people in the last days who keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. And every single one of us can be a part of that until Jesus comes in the clouds of heaven.
Joe, pray for us.
Heavenly Father, thank you for the great opportunities and privileges that we had. Help us to be responsible. Speak to us, as Jesus said, to whom much has been given, much will be required. So help us to live up to all that you have entrusted us with. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Joe, thank you very much for joining us here. You've been watching A&N in depth. Thank you for every minute that you've watched. It means a lot to us. If you can subscribe to this podcast or follow it, depending on which platform you're listening to, that will be fantastic. Every week we have new guests and great topics. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time.